This episode is dedicated to Lou Lozier.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. I am Tom Pubrock Kennedy, joined by Matt Archive Carvalho, Chris Innersleeve Palumbo, and Dan Rushmore Lozier. We are the Groovy Guys. This is the Crate Expectations podcast, where we choose a topic and pick a record from our collection to talk about. Before we get into today's topic, let's do a quick around the grounds what everyone's been digging. Dan, how's the dig been the last little while?
Actually, it's been not too bad for me because I went on a bit of a hiatus for digging, and Chris actually tipped me off that Dan Mangan had come out with a deluxe edition of I forget what it's called. Is it called Nice, Very Nice? And so it got me to start digging through the arts and crafts label artist page. I ended up getting an Andy Schaaf record. I got a Broken Social Scene record. What else did I get? Sarah Harmer. Picked up 2 copies, one for myself, one for Chris. So I'm looking forward to seeing you, Chris, so I can drop that off for you. But yeah, that's basically what I picked up in the last little while. So.
Very nice. Chris, how have you been? What have you been digging?
I'm good, and I discovered some auctions where it's a good way to pick up cheap vinyl. So Tom sent me one, which was random because it's an auction house from Burlington, and he's all the way in Australia. And picked up some Willie Nelson for $1.
Oh, beauty.
2 awesome. Albums. So 2 albums.
Wait. What did you get from Willie Nelson?
Okay.
This is the key.
So I got Willie Nelson Stardust.
Oh my God, my absolute favorite record by Willie Nelson.
It's really cool. I never listened to it.
Good.
Never listened to it before.
So good.
You guys told me to get into Willie Nelson, so I saw it. It was $1. And
You're
then
welcome.
It came, and I didn't even know this, but it has, it came 2 of them in there. So it's Willie Nelson, and then it's the Christmas album. So that's tucked into the, it's actually got pretty cool packaging. It's wrapped up like a present. They're both in like pristine. I don't even know if the Willie Nelson had ever been played. It was like untouched. It was really cool.
Man. Records at Christmas time are essential.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then I picked up The Gambler, Kenny Rogers. That actually came with the Willie Nelson, so that was 3 records for I think $1, which was pretty cool. And then I got Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds. Tom recommended it, and I picked that up for $4 or $3.88 or something. Cool. So as you know,
Have you had time to properly listen to that yet?
I haven't, and I want to do it front to back. I feel like I need to sit down and just put it on, maybe get some headphones out, and just really like digest it. So that's going to be one of my, if I get a guy's weekend or a solo weekend.
I don't know what Lee's taste in music is like, but you may need headphones for that soundtrack.
Yeah, I've listened to the one song you recommended. I can't remember what one. And it's interesting, but I was like, I'm in.
Wait, there's songs on this War of the Worlds record?
Yeah. So it's like,
it's not just the radio.
No, this isn't the radio one.
No, it's a musical interpretation of the story.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool.
That's really cool.
Cool.
And it comes with a book and everything on the inside. So I've had a quick look at it, but yeah, so I think it was under $10 and I picked up 4 records. Can't complain about that.
Nice.
There we go.
That's amazing.
Awesome, Chris. I actually, things are a bit different in Oz at the moment, so I managed to get out to one of my local record stores yesterday, actually. Didn't really have anything in mind, but grabbed Dave Brubeck Quartet, Time Out. Is that what it's called?
God. Time Out, man. That is an absolute essential jazz collection.
I know you had recommended it.
Unbelievable
and
record.
I've been trying to find more jazz. So that was good. Yeah, great pickup. Had that spinning yesterday. And I don't know if you guys know Leon Russell.
Oh, yeah.
So for the guys who don't, kind of like, Dan, tell me if this is an accurate description, kind of like southern gospel rock, but like if Elton John was southern gospel rock.
Cool.
Very cool.
That's actually not a bad description.
I like it. Yeah, that's fun.
And it was a 3 LP live album. It's really good. I love Leon Russell.
Beauty.
Very
What
cool.
about you, Matt? How are things in the digging world?
Not too bad. I had a decent week. I got Taylor Swift's Evermore. I got
love that record.
I've been meaning to get
so
that.
good.
So good.
And like it is. I can't say enough about it. It's amazing. I've listened to it through probably about 3 times now, and I just, as soon as it ends, just want to listen to it again. It's so good. This production is really subtle. I just feel like she went into a room and just played songs, which is, from a musical's perspective, that's what you want.
Well, Aaron Dessner is a big time producer and helped us write a lot of songs on that.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm not sure if any of you guys are fans of The National, but like, you know, you have a phenomenal pop singer and songwriter in Taylor Swift hooking up with Aaron Dessner, who, you know, The National, right? I mean, and
they're amazing.
I've never been a big fan of Taylor Swift's hits. Like it's not really my cup of tea. I mean, there are some songs from her that I find are really, really great, but it's not something I'll listen to a lot. But like, man, honestly, Evermore was fantastic.
He worked with her on Folklore as well.
That's correct.
Yeah,
right.
I've got Folklore, but
Yeah,
Evermore only just came out.
Yeah, Folklore is also
Love that record.
Yeah,
You know, this is probably my favorite record of hers, like Folklore and Evermore, since Red. You know, I really loved Red front to back. It was really good. In terms of other pickups for this week, I also got Guns N' Roses' Use Your Illusion Part 1, Road Apples by Tragically Hip.
Nice.
I got Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory, Aerosmith's Pump, and Revolver by the Beatles.
Jesus
Holy moly.
Christ.
Matt
Big week.
again with like a crazy
Okay.
amount of records picked up.
I don't
Actually,
even
So
want
in fairness,
Did anyone grab Tragically Hip's new record?
Yeah, I got it.
haven't picked mine up yet, no.
Yeah, I got mine. I haven't opened it.
Dan,
Yeah,
you
so
grabbed him. You grabbed
I forgot, yeah.
I grabbed one for Tom as well. But amazing that they managed to, you know, have an archive of more music to release. I mean, I know we're all just like craving for more Tragically Hip, especially since Gord passed away. But like, I'm really, really excited to listen to this.
It's
Tom, the record is it's been delayed by Canada Post by like 2 weeks. So like, I don't know where it is. I'm hoping it's going to show up. But yeah.
That's okay. I won't be there anytime soon.
See you in 2 years.
No rush. Please do not, as you suggested, wear the grooves in for me.
You don't want me to like get your copy warmed up?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
That's awesome.
So the topic for today's episode is first record you ever owned. Should be some pretty interesting picks here. Let's go from the top with Mr. Rushmore.
Okay, so for me, backstory on how I got into record collecting, because basically this story has to be told before I talk about the first record that I grabbed. Around the time I think I was about 13 or 14. I can't remember if I was in high school or if I was just getting into high school. But around that time, like my dad was basically feeding me a ton of his old hits, right? Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. He was a big Deep Purple guy. So I was getting into all this, right? So like my dad and I were bonding on all this kind of music. We used to always have this awesome tape deck and radio receiver from Technics that was always in the living room. And it was a cool matching set. And all of a sudden my dad says, you know what? You know, now that you're getting into this music, I've got all my old records up in the attic. I've got my record player up there. Let me go grab it. So he goes up into the attic. He grabs his record player, grabs his records, brings them down. My dad is shook. all the records are absolutely toast. They all got warped because they're in a hot, humid attic.
No.
So he's pretty devastated. He's got like a bunch of Floyd records, bunch of Zeppelin, bunch of whatever, like Beatles records. He's pretty devastated. Mind you, he's like, listen, take the record player, take the amp that goes with it, take the tape deck, take the radio receiver. It's yours. Here's what we're gonna do. He's like, we're gonna be able to find all these records by going to all the thrift stores, and I guarantee you we're going to be able to find whatever. And so this is like 20 years. This is like 20 years ago. This is like 2000, year 2000, right?
Yeah.
So
pre-vinyl boom.
At that time, so my dad and I, we used to go every Thursday when he was not working on the night shift. We would go and we would hit like 3 or 4 thrift stores in town, one after the other, and we'd spend all afternoon. As soon as I'd come home from school, he would either pick me up from school or I'd walk home from school, and it was like, okay, Value Village, Goodwill, Salvation Army, the Salvation Army in Whitby, like just hitting them all up. But the first time we went to Goodwill, and at the Goodwill, a lot of the like really good records weren't in the pile, and I ended up grabbing like some, like, I'm gonna call them dust records, like Boston, you know, some Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA, stuff like that. But there was also a pile of really nice stuff that was in an auction. So I didn't end up taking any of the stuff that was in the pile. I ended up looking at the auction stuff and wanted to go to that. So the auction was scheduled for the next Sunday. So next Sunday comes up. My dad and I are in line waiting for this to go up. It's me and this next guy. And it's a stack of like 20, 25 records. And it's every single Beatles record that I have, minus Let It Be Naked, which I bought as basically a reissue and a release that happened after I started collecting.
That's awesome.
It came from that auction. So,
wow.
You know, what I'm presenting today for this is Abbey Road. But really, in that whole collection was Abbey Road, Let It Be, the red and blue greatest hits records,
Beauty.
Sgt. Pepper's, A Hard Day's Night, Yellow Submarine. Like I could just keep going on. The only ones that weren't in there was like White Album, Rubber Soul, maybe a couple other ones. Anyway, so it was an amazing pickup. I have to present Abbey Road in that pile. To me, it's my favorite Beatles record. It's their penultimate album. And to me, it's their masterpiece. I think, if you like knowing the story behind Let It Be and how the band was really dysfunctional, no one wanted to be in the record studio together. Everyone wanted to go their separate ways. Abbey Road was, to me, the final record where they loved being a band. They loved being songwriters. John and Paul loved being songwriters together. And they wrote, to me, some of the greatest songs on that album. And so that's my pick, Abbey Road.
Dan, I thought that was a really good point you made around it being, at not only the last great album that they made in the right environment, enjoying songwriting, working together, but they were still pushing the envelope. Like, even for the opening track, just pulls you right into it. And then there's so much variety. Like, you go from a track like Here Comes the Sun, which is beautiful, to Mean Mr. Mustard Man, which is like there's so much variety, and like I just love that they were still pushing the boundaries in this album.
Honestly, like the Abbey Road medley, from You Never Give Me Your Money to She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, is my absolute favorite Beatles anything.
It's a killer album. Like
You Never Give Me Your Money to Sun King, to Me and Mr. Mustard, Polyethylene Pam, She Came In Through the Bathroom. Like, it is the way they edited that and made it flow just from that part. Like, to me, that's my favorite part of the record. But then on top of that, you have Here Comes the Sun, Come Together, I Want You, So Heavy, like Golden Slumber. Like, you have all this amazing music that it just seems like they finally came to a head. Like they finally came to a point where everything they had worked on, every experiment that they had touched on, finally came to this point. And like I understand why they went and made Let It Be to say like, this is it, we're done, we'll see you later. But Abbey Road could have very well have been like that's our last record and we're gone. You know what I mean?
It's the culmination of everything that came before it.
Absolutely.
So before this, like before I heard this album in its like entirety, I remember thinking, because my dad's a huge Beatles fan. Like I remember just being like, ugh, they write love songs, like they're poppy, right? Or like the hits, like, you know, the hits start like sounding the same after a while. And I remember listening to this beginning to end and being like, holy shit, where's this album been my whole life? Like if someone showed me this album for the Beatles, like I remember my mind being blown and being like, wow, this is the Beatles? And that wasn't until like high school. I remember this music video that someone made on Flash. Remember when Flash was really big, like but they did like a 3D rendered Flash, and it was in math class. And I remember pulling it up, and it was like Come Together, and it was just like this. They redid the Beatles Come Together video in a Flash file, and it was so cool. And I was like, wait a minute, and I dove into Abbey Road and was like, holy crap! Like I always just thought the Beatles were like these cheesy love songs that everyone loved, and they were just like so much more. And I was so like, not upset with myself, but just like, holy crap, I had no idea.
Well, that's the thing is that the Beatles are they're considered one of the best of all time, right? And I want to just make a point before we start talking about like best of all time. We're definitely just referring to Western music, a lot of American or UK influence, right? Like I don't want to knock on, you know, influences from other cultures that they would consider to be much better than what we listen to, but you know, for what we listen to, what played on our radio, the Beatles were always huge, and they had so many number one hits on the Billboard charts. Every record is considered to be one of the greatest of all time. But you have people out there that either hate or love the band. My cousin being one of them. My cousin's he's one of my friends that is a big musical inspiration. You know, a kind of guy that I've jammed with a bunch, and he has a very he's kind of like he listens to anything, right? But he just can't get into the Beatles. A lot of times when we're just hanging out and we're spinning records and we're not talking about music, I'll toss Beatles music on there, and he'll go, "Oh, what's this? This sounds really good." And I'll be like, "That's a fucking Beatles song," and then I'll be like, I know you like the Beatles, you just don't like all of it," which is kind of what. Yeah, but that's kind of like where that's where everyone comes.
Not like them.
Like that to me, it's like there's a bunch of Beatles stuff that I don't like, straight up. A bunch of their early stuff I'm really not a fan of, but it's when they get experimental, when they get deeper into, it's when Paul and John really get deep into their songwriting relationship. It's when George starts writing songs and becomes a real influence in their production. That's when the Beatles become a real band, and that's where the best content comes from.
Agreed.
And that experience that Chris was just talking about of just like thinking the Beatles were all pop and love songs and then discovering Abbey Road. Imagine being a Beatles fan or being around back in the 50s and 60s, and they've released like a dozen, maybe 13 albums of that style, and then Rubber Soul comes out. It's 1965, and you're just like, who is this band? Like that's when they started that experimentation, right? That's the experience Chris had essentially, but with Abbey Road instead of Rubber Soul.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys kind of spoke a lot to what I wanted to jump into. You know, once George started writing for the band, I love George Harrison. I love a lot of the music he's put out. There's like, sorry, you guys took a lot of what I was going to touch on. But one thing I wanted to say, you know, I do feel there's a time and the place for Beatles and their entire music catalog, beginning to end. You know, when they were first starting out, they had a lot of poppy hits. I still love some of those poppy hits. I do feel there's a time and a place for them, but I really do. I relate more to like the experimental stuff and the later back of their catalog, and I really do feel with Abbey Road, you know, I think there you could kind of tell there's a certain feel in the music where that was their last album where they actually did really enjoy playing together.
Yeah.
And then, thereafter, it's just like, we're putting this out, kind of like what you spoke to, Dan, like this is it, Sayonara. I really do feel there was a certain feel to that album where they were like, this is still a time when we're enjoying each other's company and the writing process. And
like you listen to Let It Be, and if you listen to the actual release of it, there are some songs where Lennon's guitar tracks are dog shit. And that's because he just didn't give a shit.
100%.
Yoko Ono was in the record studio basically rolling her eyes every time they would do something. Paul was really trying to just keep everyone together, and you could just tell that they were checked out. Mind you, it's still an amazing record. Like still
even when they were phoning it in, they were still kicking ass.
It's the Beatles, right? Like you're talking about three, and Ringo, you're amazing. If you're listening to this, I hope you are. Shout out to Ringo Starr.
Mm-hmm.
You're unbelievable, bud. And I just the Beatles aren't the Beatles without you, but the songwriters in that band were John, Paul, and George. And, they still came out with a hit record, despite the fact that they didn't want to be around each other.
No kidding.
But Abbey Road, you could just tell that they still want to be a band, and to me the other special thing about this record is that I wasn't really a Beatles fan before I picked this collection up. So diving through it and listening to it, like I got into the Beatles because of their experimental stuff. The first Beatles song that I really loved was Strawberry Fields Forever.
Yeah.
And it was one of those songs where it's like, I couldn't believe what I was listening to. And it really got me into the whole, like, at the end of this song, you hear, I buried Paul. I think it's like Ringo says, like, I buried Paul. And I was like, what the hell is, like, what is that all about, right? And you start researching it, and then there's the whole like Paul is dead stuff.
Sgt. Pepper's.
And the cool thing about this album cover is like going into the Paul is dead theory. It's George is dressed in denim. He's the gravedigger. Paul's not wearing any shoes because why would a dead guy in a coffin wear shoes? Ringo is someone at the funeral dressed up in his Sunday best in all black, and then John in all white as the priest, right? Like that's just like a dumb theory of like Paul is dead kind of stuff, right? But
so many threads on the internet.
As soon as you read that, you're like, I want to listen to this, and then first song that comes on is Come Together, and you're like, oh my god, that's a bang. That's
I like
a
how
bang.
you kind of played off that.
Absolutely.
That's so cool. I mean, even the recording process for that, correct me if I'm wrong, but they experimented with a lot of new gear that was fresh at that time. They experimented with different reverbs and stuff. A lot of newish gear and newish plugins that are available now are modeled off of a lot of that older stuff that they used back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
That's cool.
Getting into how groundbreaking the Beatles were, right? Like, they were some of the first artists to use stereo recordings, right? Mm-hmm. If you really listen to this record with headphones, sometimes you start listening to a song and you're like, something wrong with my headphones right now, and then all of a sudden the right ear kicks in and you're like, okay, there we go.
Yeah.
The drum track's in the right, piano's in the left, Paul's coming through both, and it's like, and then the song builds up and it comes through everything, and you're like, oh shit, like they really figured this out, right?
So our first record player, me and Lee's, inherited one from her parents. It only had right. So for like, and we didn't know this.
To one channel.
And we only had one channel, but we didn't know. So like we were listening to albums and I was like, oh, this is good or whatever. And then you listen to it like on Spotify or on CD in the car. And I was like, what the hell is this?
It's like, whoa, what
Yeah,
are we
and I was
missing?
like,
Whoa, there's a drum track in this
and I was
song.
like, yeah, but it was especially on newer records. So I'd be like listening to like, I don't know, Dr. Dog or something on the record player, or like Matt Mays or something. And then in the car, I was like, holy shit, I thought this was like there was only like a rhythm guitar. I didn't know there was like a whole underlying like electric guitar section.
Oh my goodness.
It killed me. So I love that idea of,
That's
we just
hilarious.
upgraded because of that. But yeah, that's huge. I love it.
Nice.
So, Dan, the one thing that you didn't divulge right back at the start of that story around the auction, which sounds like you got a lot of, the meat of your collection, the real classic rock stuff from that one auction. How much did you pay?
Oh my God. Okay. So it's like 25 records. I paid, I think it was about $40, maybe $50 total.
Amazing.
So $2 a record. And we're talking like significant portion of my Zeppelin discography, most of my Beatles records, a bunch of Eric Clapton. It's to this day, and that's the thing. Like, we talk about record collecting. I'm kind of getting back into it because I did most of my record collecting in early 2000s, where you're picking up records for 50 cents, $2 at the most. And then, sure, I'd pay $20, $25. Like, I bought like a Dark Side of the Moon 30th anniversary. I bought Let It Be Naked, which were expensive. I bought, Neil Young Live at Massey. That was an expensive record. But then it got to the point where, like, in 2010s, where you're like, I can't fucking pay $25 for Neil Young Harvest because I could have picked that up for 25 cents back in the day. And it's like, so I went 10 years without collecting records to the point where I was like, well, vinyl's back and it's here to stay. People are gobbling up all the records. If I want that record, I'm gonna have to pay $20 for it.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, you can't replicate that nowadays. You can't, unless it's through an auction. And even then, a lot of the auctions go for a lot more than that. Speaking of what you pick up Harvest for, I picked it up not too long ago. It was $50. So double what you just mentioned.
Unbelievable.
Like, it's crazy. Like, what vinyl costs now is insane. So picking up
painful.
in the early 2000s, even all the way up to, you said 2010, 2011, you could get records for nothing. Like, you could pick up lots, whether in an auction, whether online on eBay, for nothing. And you just can't do that anymore.
Well, like I said, my dad works shift work, right? So 2 weeks he would work during the day, and then 2 weeks he'd work at night. So for 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, we'd go on these digs, and I would come home with handfuls of records. Mm-hmm. And this was a time where it was like I was mostly listening to classic rock or punk music, right? And so punk music wasn't coming out on vinyl, but classic rock was. And I would pick up literally everything I could find, right? Like David Wilcox, fucking Kim Mitchell, Boston, just the ones that come to my mind. But records now that I couldn't really care less about. So I had built up this insane collection because every Thursday I would come home with 5 or 6 records that I would find at Goodwill, I'd find at Value Village, I'd find at Salvation Army, that I was literally paying 50 cents for.
Dan, how much, you said like one of the expensive records was Let It Be Naked, but how much did you pay for it?
I think I paid like $40 or $45 for it.
Wow.
So it's even still like probably 25% of what it's worth these days.
Yeah, I mean, I think on Discogs average price is like between $150 and $200.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So it's changed.
Yeah, it's changed, man. It's really changed.
Yeah, that's crazy though. Honestly, I'd pick, like, if I could find Let It Be Naked for $40-$50, I would pay that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, there's no chance. I really hope they reissue it one day.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe
that is high on the priority list.
When was it released? 03. Maybe they'll do a 20-year anniversary.
03 or 04, yeah.
Maybe they'll do a 20-year anniversary in a couple of years. That'd be nice.
It is. I mean, Let It Be Naked. Deluxe. It's probably going to be a pick for a later episode, but
yeah,
I agree with Paul. It's the way to listen to Let It Be. Straight up.
Awesome, Dan. What would you say is the most popular song on that, and what would be your favorite?
I mean, I think the best songs the hit songs on the record are Come Together and Here Comes the Sun. So I'm going to have to pick Come Together because I much prefer that over Here Comes the Sun. But my number one favorite track on this record is You Never Give Me Your Money. I think it's a deep cut on that album that a lot of people don't give enough listen to. But yeah, to me, I think that song is absolutely perfect, and it's perfection from all the Beatles. They all play incredibly well. I think the drum track on that album is amazing. It may not be Ringo's, it's probably Paul's drum track, but I think every single one of them has an opportunity to sing on that song as well. And I think it's a really special track on that album.
Nice.
Sweet. Good choice.
Thanks, Dan. That was a really awesome pick, and so great to hear the story around it and how you got into collecting records. Mr. Palumbo, what have you got for us?
All right. So I have another Sam Roberts record. Classic.
This podcast series is just Chris sharing Sam Roberts records.
Yeah.
That's all it's going to be the whole time. No, I think this will be the last one for a while, at least. This season, we'll say. This season, at least. It should be. I can't even promise that. I have no idea.
Yeah, but it's the record's different because has it been chewed by Bun Bun?
This one has not.
Okay.
I did the dramatic pause.
Nice.
I did the dramatic pause.
It just dropped in value.
It has no. This one's actually in.
It dropped in sentimental value.
This one is not in perfect condition. There is incense burns and probably joint burn.
Not surprised that
Incense
your
and
record
joint
is not in perfect condition.
and joint burns. Well, they were well used, well loved.
Right. What's the record, Chris?
So it's Sam Roberts. We Were Born in a Flame. And the reason I picked this one is very simple. This is my story is very similar to Lozier. My dad gave me a bunch. They're all in like red milk crates, which I still have. Half of them were destroyed. That he claims he inherited them that way. But I think that's where I got my poor taking care of records from is,
He's a Palumbo.
He's a Palumbo, right? He's going to be so mad when he listens to this. I keep throwing him under the bus. But he gave me a bunch. But this is the first record I actually purchased with my own money. And this is what kicked off my collection where I wanted to collect, not just go through my dad's old things or go through someone's garage. Just grab the ones I wanted. And this was in, I want to say 2000. No, actually, I know for sure. It was in June 2004. And it was the first, I picked this record up at the first concert I ever went to, by myself without an adult. So it was me, all my friends from high school, and it was in Pushlinch. It was called Lake Alive on the outskirts of Cambridge, my hometown. There's this sick lake. It's this sick ass lake. And it was dying. And so they thought, to bring life and raise some money, they threw a huge concert. So I do believe, and my memory's a little foggy, but it was Matt Mays opened for an acoustic set. Then it was the Trews, Sam Roberts, and then I think it was Bachman Turner Overdrive, or it was either Randy.
Nice.
Canadian legend.
Yeah, it was
Can Rock.
It was Can Rock Central,
Yeah, no
and
kidding.
I remember hearing Matt Mays and just being this is cool. The Trews at the time, for those of you overseas or whatever who don't know the Trews, they're a big Canadian indie band in Canada, but probably nowhere else in the world. And we were so excited. They just put out their first album, and we actually got to hang out with them. They came out. They actually were the ones running their own merch booth. So they autographed our shirts. I still have it hanging in my closet. It's pretty cool.
Nice.
And at the Sam Roberts table, it was the Higher Learning Tour. They had, it looks like a Jack Daniels. I still have the t-shirt. And I picked up this record, and that was the first time I ever saw a record outside of someone's garage or basement. And I remember thinking I want that. And I remember seeing the price. It was probably $35 at the time. And I was
That's a lot of money back then.
and it was 2000. I was working at a grocery store for $6 an hour. And I remember being humming and hawing. And at the end of the night, I just remember being screw it, I'm buying this album.
Nice.
We had to walk home from that concert because none of our parents, this is pre-cell phones, none of our parents came to pick us up because we couldn't find a payphone to call them. So we just we ended up walking halfway home, found a payphone, someone picked us up.
A long walk.
That is a long walk, yeah.
You called collect.
Parents, someone did. I think Greg, if I'm not mistaken, Greg Hood's mom came to pick us up, right? And we all piled in the van, and I remember going home in my basement. All of you, I think, have been in my basement, pre-renovations. Orange shag carpet, wood paneling on the walls, stucco ceiling that went down halfway down the walls, a 70s fireplace with exposed brick. And we had old beanbag chairs, and the record player was always set up in the corner. And I remember putting it on. I had these really crappy 70s headphones with the twisted coil. And I remember just sitting in a beanbag chair, putting it on. And this is pre-drugs, pre-drinking Chris. We're talking, I think it was grade 10 or 11. And I put the headphones on, and I remember turning the light out, and I had this stoplight that would flash to the music. And I had it crank so loud that it was just flashing. And I remember just lying there listening to the record, and it finished. And I just got up and I just did it again. And I was just holy shit, out of body, out of mind experience. And I was after that, every show I went to, I said it last time, every concert, it was I'm buying a record, I'm buying a record, I'm buying a record.
I just want to touch on those headphones. Did they have cushioning or no?
Yes, but
they did, okay.
But the old school, they weren't record headphones. I remember my mom worked with at a school for students with autism. So they were noise canceling, but also used for music. But we're talking 70s with the strap. So it wasn't actually designed for music. It was designed to you would put just noise through them to help students calm down. So it sounded like garbage, but I just remember being oh my God. And I couldn't turn it up because my parents were sleeping, but yeah.
Well, my parents had these headphones that were it was basically a piece of, it's putting a piece of plywood on your ear. And so sure, you were able to get the sound right next to your ear, but they were so uncomfortable to wear that you just, I figured that was just how the way headphones were always, they were always made back in the day.
Chris, you know how you said you were umming and ahhing about whether to buy the record? I can't remember who it was that said to me, you never regret the records that you bought. You only regret the ones that you left behind, right? And especially
the truth.
An album like this, bought at the time it was, unless they reissue it, you would spend so much money tracking that record down. You bought it when you wanted it, and now you've got it.
Yeah, I agree, because I'm missing only one from his discography, Love at the End of the World. And I remember being on the website, and I was I bought the CD. I picked the CD over the record. Because the record didn't come autographed or something, and I wanted the CD autographed.
Bad.
And I was to this day, I have never seen it in a store or whatever it is, and I kick myself all the time, right? And yeah, I fully agree. That's a brilliant statement, which is why I spend way too much money nowadays on Mouse Rat records. But there we go.
Well worth the price.
Come on. I'm so excited.
100%. Yeah, kind of speaking to that, I'm trying to collect Sam Roberts records right now as well, and yeah, they're so expensive, especially that one in particular. I was looking at it today. I don't know what you picked yours up for, but the reissue of it, the 3-piece set that they have out now, is $54.99.
That's crazy. That's crazy to me.
Oh my God. And that's the thing, now that I'm sort of picking up on record collecting again. I used to only collect records because I wanted a collection of records that were meant to be listened on vinyl. And so even in the 2000s, I wasn't considering even buying records for music that was being released at that time. And now that I want to have more of my favorite music from that era on vinyl, it's damn, I wanted to, like I said, I bought a Broken Social Scene record. The one that I really want is You Forgot It in People. And it's how am I ever going to find that without it being expensive at a record store, right? Kind of miss the boat if I don't want to pay $60 for it.
it's crazy thing because I didn't care. Like, I didn't know I wanted to listen to records, like modern records on vinyl, until this is the one that did it. And I remember being like, and I'm so happy I did buy it. And I remember being like, well, now I want everything. And even then, like, records weren't cheap, like 20, 25, 30 bucks. Now, this one didn't, but what was really cool in like the mid 2000s was you bought the record and it came with a download card, right? So that's how
they still do though, Chris. Like that Dan Magan album that I bought for you is going to come with an MP3 download. But who gives a shit about the MP3 download because it's on Spotify?
Yeah, but in the 2000s that was huge. Right?
Huge.
In the 2000s,
right?
Story.
So that's how
you had to download a file on LimeWire with a bunch of viruses.
Or torrent, like torrenting.
Exactly.
You're on the Pirate Bay or whatever, trying to look for, and you can rock on the Pirate Bay was hard to find, right? So I remember that's how I justified it. I remember my parents being like, "What do you want for your birthday?" "Oh, I want this album." And I'm like, "Oh, CD?" It's like, "No, get it, but make sure you get the download card so I could put it on, my Zune, because Zunes were cool."
I was just gonna say, it's funny when birthdays come up. My family always says, "Oh, what do you want for your birthday?" Or Christmas, same thing. I literally just have a list of records. I say anything off this, I'm good. Just there's my list. I'm happy.
That is a brilliant idea.
Lee gets mad at me.
Yeah, give me records.
I was told. Me and Lee used to, when we first started dating. Lee's my wife for everyone out there in podcast land. When we first started dating, that's what we got each other. We exchanged records constantly. And then now it's like, she's like, "Don't get me a record. Don't." And she's like, "I'm not buying you any more records." I'm like, "No, but I want records." "Well, you can buy me." And she's like, "I don't want any more." "Okay. All right."
I'm currently in a one in, one out deal with my wife, where it's like, if you buy a record, you got to get rid of one.
So that's
fair, because I got some dust in my collection. I got to get rid of that Boston record. I got to get rid of that David Wilcox record that I mentioned.
Any Chicago, just throw it in the garbage and it's all good.
Whoa. No way. Chicago's staying, bro. That's the good stuff.
Good. Okay, that's gonna be a hot.
I want 1 to 16.
Okay, you can have mine. Oh my god. But anyway, that'll be a hot topic. Maybe a hot topic there. I didn't realize we had Chicago fans.
That's a good one for hot take. Chicago. Let's go. Well, we already know what I'm going to say, so it's not really hot.
I guess not.
So, Chris, for the playlist, which I presume Dan is building for this episode, most popular track off that, and I think I know what the answer to that will be, and your favorite.
So, most popular is Brother Down, I would assume.
Yeah.
It has to be Brother Down. It's still played on Canadian radio way too much. I actually hate, like, when that song first came out, I hated it. I was not a Sam Roberts fan because I hated that song so much. And it was seeing him live. I remember I talked about it in the last episode, seeing him live, and he had like other harder stuff that I was like, because at that time I was like pop punk all the way, or like riff rock. But anyway, this one's really, really hard. It jumps around. I listened to this album way too. I listened to Sam Roberts way too much. I was in like the top 0.1% of his plays on Spotify, which is something I don't like to talk about. Like, way to go.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, right. This Wreck of a Life is a song that doesn't get a lot of play. And depending on what you're going through, it's kind of one of those like down in the dump songs, and it always just hits me hard. So I'm going to pick Wreck of a Life for today.
The complete antithesis to your life.
Yeah, like it's good. Or I don't know. Every part of me, every song on this is a banger. But there we go. All right, Tom. So what's your first record? What do we got?
Okay, so I'm going to go with first record. This isn't the first record I bought. I was thinking about this just before. The first record I ever bought was actually one of Chris's favorite bands, Radiohead. King of Limbs, which I bought. It was a record I was living in. It wasn't for me. It was a gift. So it was terrible. When I was living in Brantford, that store on the corner, it was like a record store and a comic book store. I can't remember what it was called, but it was a record store day release, and my dad was visiting from Australia, and he's a massive Radiohead fan. So the first record I ever actually bought was to gift to him, because I remember, Dan, you had your turntable and collection at your house in Brantford, and we would listen to records a lot, and I wanted to start collecting because Dad was a collector and you had your collection, but I just thought, if I'm going to be moving back to Australia, I don't want to have to be either getting rid of a awesome collection or figuring out how to transport it. So I didn't start collecting until I moved back to Australia in 2012, but the first one I bought was King of Limbs. First one that I owned in my own collection was Essential Jimi Hendrix. So this was a gift from Dad, funnily enough. So when I moved back to Sydney, Dad gave me his he had like a 70s Toshiba hi-fi system. It was the family all-in-one with the radio, preamp, cassette player, turntable, and speakers. So he upgraded his setup to Sansui, turntable, amp, and speakers, and gave me his hand-me-down. And first record he kicked my collection off with was this. It's a double LP. It's a compilation. It was released posthumously. I think it was released in the late 70s. And it's basically a collection of every Essential Hendrix track. It's a really awesome collection of Hendrix, and a great way. I don't collect a lot of greatest hits, but in terms of getting into collecting and getting into, I was already into Hendrix, but to have a record of Hendrix's work before you start buying his albums, it was perfect.
Beautiful. I love the choice. I just got a quick ask the group. Best guitar player of all time, yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
He's on the Mount Rushmore. Let's just put
100%.
Comfortably on the Rushmore.
He's definitely the most interesting guitar player.
Okay.
So Tom, again, Hendrix I listen to just like here and there, comes on, but I never dove in. And you sent this in the group. And so I spent the other day looking for this album, but it's not, you can't find it bundled together. So
no, it's not on Spotify.
It's not on Spotify.
But you could look at the tracks and then.
So I spent the afternoon doing that on YouTube, and even then it was hard to find it, like his versions. There was lots of covers of those songs that are on there, which was really, really cool to kind of listen to. And also they did a lot of like slowing things down, which I was like, that dove me into a whole world of like other Hendrix stuff where it's like people were like slowing the songs down or speeding them up and like interpreting them in different ways. And that was that was really cool. Yeah. And I was like, oh, there's like a whole nother world to Hendrix other than him playing the Star Spangled Banner on, on that compilation from Woodstock sort of thing. Yeah. So that's really cool. And I never thought I'd probably own a lot of Hendrix. And I was like, after searching around, I'm like, I want that. That's the perfect kind of album for someone who's not big into it, but would love to throw it on at, a Saturday night and just enjoy that weird psychedelic kind of Hendrix vibe.
It's an incredible compilation. It's funny you mentioned that Woodstock. I actually find that Woodstock record to be frustratingly absent of Hendrix because it's just Star Spangled Banner, and it's it's an amazing interpretation and it's iconic and everybody knows it, but it's just this little snippet of what would have been such an incredible set. And the thing with Hendrix is, I think when I was younger, it was a frustration for me that as I've gotten older, I've grown to appreciate it. Hendrix live was entirely different to studio Hendrix. That they were a jam when they were playing live. Like three incredible musicians, and when they were playing live, it was a jam. It was a trip, and you were there for the ride. Totally different to studio Hendrix. When I was younger, that was frustrating because I just wanted to see the live version of what I heard on the album. But obviously, as I got older, you appreciate, wow, this is a guy at the top of his craft who's then trying to push himself. He's trying to elevate himself even higher than what he's capable of. And that's, to me, the experience of Hendrix, and the beauty of Hendrix is he was constantly pushing the boundaries. When he was in the studio, he was experimenting. He was trying new technology. He was trying to create something that was different. And he was prolific too, right? He spent so much time in Electric Ladyland Studios, the studio that he built. He would spend hours upon hours in there at night. He would go and grab some musicians. He would go out, drinking or doing drugs. Then he would pull a bunch of musicians into his studio, and they would spend hours and hours just jamming and experimenting and exploring and then cutting tracks. And that's the reason, this guy died in the 70s and his estate is still releasing music. And you listen to, it's this weird experience. Like, they released New Hendrix, right? That was recorded decades ago. And you sit down and you go, man, I love this. Like, I want more. I want more Hendrix. And then the thing that sucks is he died when he was 27. Imagine what he would have created if he had been around for the 80s and the 90s. And, I think in a weird, this might be a weird comparison. I think of Hendrix like Prince, like a guy who was just at the top of his game and was pushing boundaries and wasn't afraid to experiment and do something different. So imagine what music he would have given us if he'd been around for those changes in technology and changes in interest and changes in genre. He's for me, as a fan of guitar and as a musician, he's one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I would love to hear what he would have recreated if like you said, if he lived 80s, 90s, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what he would come up with. It would be awesome. I really agree too. There's something about seeing a live musician and just being in that experience at that time. It's really hard to recreate in the studio because everything in the studios, it's got to be polished, it's got to be perfect, blah, 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 blah. You can't recreate that on the stage. Like, the stage is just this raw energy. Even if there's mistakes, you take it and you just enjoy the ride. And I really do think, like, the Hendrix experience, it's what it was all about. There's so many bands that are like that, going and seeing them live, that's how you're supposed to see them. That's how you're supposed to receive their music.
Yeah, I mean, like, that whole being in the moment and being live, like, from my own experience, there's some times where it almost seems like you can't make a mistake when you're in that moment, and that every single note that you touch, it just seems to be the right note. And I'm sure Jimmy, being at the top of his craft, like, being better at doing that than anybody, right? Like, this is the lick I'm gonna play, this is the progression I'm gonna play, and this is just it, right? And when you, especially too, when you vibe with two other musicians and you can just look at each other and just head nod, and then you're kind of reading each other's minds, and that's where you're gonna head to. That's a special relationship to have with guys that you jam with. And 100%. It's really hard to attain. So, I mean, yeah, like, could you just imagine being at a Jimi Hendrix concert back in the day?
Gives me goosebumps to just even think of it. Like that. Yeah.
And the other point I want to make about Jimmy too is that, he spent a lot of time in the UK, right? And I think he was like a bigger fan of the rock and roll scene in London than he was in the US. And for the most part, he brought a lot of UK rock vibes back to America and really pumped this psychedelic rock movement from the UK into the US. But I think the one thing that we don't talk about enough about Jimmy is how much of a student he was.
Yeah.
And how he was just, like, you want to talk about, like, all these amazing gigs from back in the day, the Stones, the Beatles. He was hanging out with all of these guys and he was studying them.
Yeah.
And he was just taking a little bit out of everybody's playbook, and that's how he was coming up with his stuff, right? And that's important when it comes to writing music. You can't just expect yourself to be inspired by nothing. You have to be inspired by something. And how big of a student he was of rock and roll is why he is,
and he was
so
only 27
in that space.
I can't handle that. Yeah, I can't handle that.
His
only
catalog
27.
at 27,
Like he didn't even hit his prime.
as I said, it's still releasing. So imagine him being a student of the scene for another 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Be unreal.
It makes me sad.
Mm-hmm.
I see. It's kind of like the true rock and roll story, though. Like, he came in, he went out. Like,
he burned bright.
Yeah, it's kind of it's sad, but it's perfect. Like, it's I know you guys are saying I don't want to. I love the allure. I love the mystery behind it. Maybe he burnt out in the 80s and we're like, ugh. He just like hit his peak and then went into like some weird techno punk in the 80s and just got like washed up. And then in the 90s
we've talked about.
Yeah, and then in the 90s he just like covered Nirvana or something and it was just like this, he put out garbage, right? He ruined himself. I don't know. It could go the other way, which I love.
Yeah, that's
true. I love to hate it, but like
I actually want someone to create an alternate reality movie where Jimi Hendrix lives
through the 80s and becomes like a synthesizer. Who's the band?
We talked about it though, right? The 80s was not kind to a lot of artists.
No.
It was not.
No.
Well, it's a lot of it came down to drugs, right? And these guys were doing a lot of drugs, and a lot of drugs that are known to inspire, right? And Jimmy, there's the myth of he used to, leave a cut on his forehead, and he used to put an acid tab on there, and then put his bandana on, right? So, like you can imagine him being on stage ready to jam, and he's halfway through an acid trip. He's just getting inspired, and being such a great musician, you just know how to bring a chord progression to the next, how to finish that lick, how to start one. And when you're high on acid, he's probably just getting inspired so easily. And honestly, like it's easy to say like, I wish I would have had Jimmy in the 80s. Well, Jimmy in the 80s would have been hopped up on cocaine and Quaaludes. For a fact he would have gone down the techno route, he would have gone down the synthesizer route, and it would have been the garbage that every other prolific artist in the 60s and 70s went down. Like, honestly, tell me an artist that was at the top of his game in the 60s and 70s that actually put out great stuff in the 80s.
Hey, Rolling Stones Trans is a great album.
I was going to say Paul McCartney must have.
Okay.
Paul McCartney.
GNR.
Please stop.
Guns N' Roses? Yeah, but they weren't.
Stop.
Guns N' Roses weren't out in the 70s.
Yeah, but they started in the 80s.
Yeah.
They weren't prolific in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, that's fair.
They were coming out with music that was ready for the times, and they were coming out with new stuff.
I'm just saying the world missed out on a John Paul Jones, Jimi Hendrix synth jam.
Oh God. Absolute trash bag of music that would have been.
Okay. All right. End it here. Let's end it on that note. Tom,
okay.
what's your choices?
Yeah. Okay. So just looking at the back here, I think it's hard to argue with All Along the Watchtower being one of his most popular songs.
Absolutely.
A cover.
A cover. Yep.
Well,
yep.
Again, mind blowing. I found that years and years later.
Dylan has said though.
Yeah.
That's
a better
Jimmy's
song.
Yes.
That's Jimmy's song.
That's the reason I found out about it. I remember hearing that interview or somewhere, and I was like, wait a minute, what? And I went down the rabbit hole. But anyway, sorry, Tom. I hijacked. There you go.
No, that's okay. It's hard. I love so many of these tracks. I'd probably go with, and I don't know if everyone would love this, but I'd go with Boulder's Love as one of my favorites of his from Axis.
That's a beautiful choice.
I love that album so much, man. Every time I put that album on, I just get like chills listening to it. I love it.
Love it.
Okay, Mr. Archive Carvalho, what you got for us from the State Library archives there at your house?
All right, so how I got into record collecting was actually kind of by accident. I was always a big collector of music, and when I was purchasing this, I thought I was actually purchasing the CD version. So it's The Killer's Hot Fuss. I love
that's a happy little accident.
Yeah, I'm excited. That's good.
It was a very happy accident. And then what's even nice, it's translucent.
Ooh.
Beauty.
Yeah, I like that. I'm a big collector of colored vinyl. I'll do it all day, every day. So yeah, it was a nice little surprise when it showed up at the house. I'm a big Killers fan. A little background about this. So the producer of the album was Jeff Saltzman, mixed by Alan Mulder. He's done a ton of big bands. My Bloody Valentine, Smashing Pumpkins, Nine Inch Nails, The Cure, Yeah Yeah Yeahs, just to name a few.
Wow.
The other one that also helped mix this is Mark Needham. He's done Moby, Tokyo Police Cub, Airborne, Toxic Event, Train, Pink, and so on and so forth. I think Fleetwood Mac as well.
Shit.
Yeah, great album. Start to finish. I'm sure we're all really familiar with this album. It was a big release in the mid 2000s. They were probably one of the big bands back in the mid 2000s, and even to this day, they're still huge. Yeah, this album, just start to finish, everything on this album is amazing. Kind of a fun fact about this one. They actually have what's known as the Murder Trilogy, so a little bit of dark history there. The song that opens the album, Jenny Was a Friend of Mine, is actually Robert Chambers. I think I'm saying his name right. And essentially, yeah, it was about this guy murdered his girlfriend, who was named Jennifer, in Central Park, and this was part of the inspiration for the writing process of the song. The other two songs that followed along with this are Midnight Show and a B-side that's not on that but is on their B-side Sawdust album, Leave the Bourbon on the Shelf. So definitely something cool to kind of check out. My favorite tracks off this one, I'm going to have to go with one of the big singles off this one, which is All the Things I've Done. That's my favorite song on the album. And then Change Your Mind. That one also is a big one for me.
Me too. That all these things that I've done is probably one of my favorite tracks by them. And
100%.
The whole A side of that album is one hit after another.
Yeah, one thing I do have to add, actually, their B-sides for this are unbelievable. They actually went and re-recorded some of these for Sawdust. One song that sticks out in particular to me is Under the Gun. If you listen to the original recording to the one that they did on Sawdust, there's one on Sawdust just slaps hard. It is so good. And if that were on the original release, that would probably be one of my favorite songs off the album.
All right, so you said you said, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this album. I'm familiar with the hits on this album. And first, I did not know, I'm going to say this because I did not know all of these hits came from this album.
Yes.
Right?
It's crazy.
5 hits in a row.
Yo.
Yeah.
And when you said, in the 2000s, one of the biggest bands, I remember watching an interview, and the lead singer, his name's escaping me right now.
Brandon Flowers.
Yes. He was like, we are the biggest rock and roll band in the world. And I remember kind of laughing. But now that I went back and listened to this album, and I said this to you guys in the chat, I was like, I get it. I get why in 2004, this album was amazing. It's good now. Don't get me wrong. It's I listened to it front to back probably 5 or 6 times in a row. Just because I wanted to listen to it front to back, so I actually had something to say in this chat. And then I found myself just putting it on, and I was like, oh man, I get it. This is and I know all the hits. I was actually skipping the hits because we've all heard them a million times. But I was like, the riffs are good. It has solid riffs, solid lyrics, and I'm kind of happy I missed it because I think it would have changed my musical taste in 2004. I think it would have taken me down a different musical path than I did, which I'm not upset about. But I was like, I finally understand why people like the Killers, right? Not just the hits. The hits come on and I lose my mind like everyone else does at weddings. But I get the rest now. I finally understand why it's the Killers are a good band. And I never gave them the time of day before.
Do you know what's interesting to me? I'm similar to Chris. I know the Killers, and I know they're big tracks. I've actually seen them live. Lozier gave me a ticket that one time. They played at the amphitheater. I was more jacked up to see Wolfmother, but the Killers, they put on a good show. What's really and that album, talk about having every hit song on one album. It's mind blowing that they had so many massive tracks on that one album. But what's interesting to me is it's essentially like new wave. Like they made new wave popular again 20 years after
100%.
it first kind of emerged, right? It was like stadium rock new wave.
Yeah.
Because they're Vegas, right? And you can tell, especially in the front man, that showmanship, like they're Vegas. Yep. They grew up Vegas, and you can just tell from their presence and that showmanship. Like I get why they were so big and probably still are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what's kind of funny about these guys is like the way they got together was all through a newspaper ad. Like they responding to classifieds.
No idea.
Cool.
Which was really cool. I didn't know that up until I saw them in Toronto and they were explaining how they got together, and I was like, oh my God, that's like, that wouldn't happen nowadays. It'd be like, oh, I saw,
it's old school.
He's like, I saw something on the internet where someone was looking for a guitar player. You know what I mean? That's kind of cool. The big thing with these guys too is, in the mid 2000s, there were a couple big bands, but one in particular that was kind of getting rock and roll kind of like revived was the Strokes. And Brandon Flowers has even said, at the time of hearing the Strokes' first record, they threw out a lot of what they had because they're like, you know what? We can't touch this. This is a perfect album to us. The only song that survived was Mr. Brightside.
It's a solid tune.
And then they started writing from that, which is kind of cool. And, a lot of bands actually were really into the Killers when they first came out because they were considered like a kind of a rock revival. It's the new wave coming back again. Not just from their musical style, also in the tone of like the vocals, what they were doing in the studio, a lot of different things. It was really cool. I don't know, that kind of stuff sticks out to me.
Yeah, and I think the shame of the Killers is that they came at a time where, listening to an album was kind of dead. And you either you liked the hits or you didn't like them, and then if you liked them, then that was it. And if you didn't like them, you didn't listen to anything, right? And so for someone like me who,
that's a great point.
I spent a lot of my time listening to like the video countdowns, right? And how every week there was a Killer song on there, and I liked them, but I would download those on Napster or LimeWire or whatever it was at the time. But I wasn't downloading their discography, right? Because I didn't know about it, and it wasn't how you listen to music. Mm-hmm. But now that you go back and you know what, like, I really like the Killers. I want to listen to an album. You're like, oh shit, the stuff on the B side, I didn't give it a time of day, but I actually like it better than I like their hits.
Their B sides are strong.
Yeah, big time. I forget, there was an album that you had got me to listen to. I forgot which one it was.
Was it Samstown?
I think it was Samstown, yeah. But I honestly couldn't believe. I was like, it was Samstown. I was like, oh my God. Like, the hits on that record, are amazing. You listen to the rest of the album, you're like, oh my God, I just can't believe I've never heard these songs before. Mm-hmm.
It's a shame almost. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So I'm going off what Dan said with the video countdown. That's what I remember about the Killers. Their like music videos, even though like the hits got old, I remember watching the music videos and being like, it was like movie production. Like everyone at that time was doing like
big production
value, but like the Killers ones were always like entertaining or like a little bit like scandalous, but not like too scandalous where if your mom walked in, you wanted to like change the channel really quick, right? But
like they told a story.
I was going to say it was probably that point where they music video clips stopped being just like the band playing to being like a little movie, a little story.
Yeah. And they did that so well. Yeah. I remember that.
Very well.
At the same time, going back to like Dan's thing, I remember being in like HMV and looking at the Killers album, and they wanted like $25-$30 for a CD in 2004. And I remember being like, if I can listen, I'll download the 2 songs I like because you didn't get exposure to the rest. Right. And down back then, especially my house, it'd take you all night or 2 days to download a song. So I wasn't wasting my time.
Exactly.
I wasn't wasting my time on
you couldn't download a whole album. It would take you days.
Right.
Yeah.
I wasn't wasting my time on a song that was called what is it? Andy, You're a Star, which like
That's actually a good song.
which is one of my
It's too risky.
like one of my favorites now. Like when I heard this song, I was
Heavy
like,
investment.
what the like I missed this. This is great. Or like but yeah, I don't know. But I remember their music videos, and I remember being like, these guys are cool. Like I didn't want to admit they're cool, but they were like, these guys are cool.
Yeah.
I wonder if the vinyl revival is going to change songwriting or album approaches again, so that contemporary artists start, because that's one of the things I love is an album experience, especially a concept album or even a loose concept where you listen to it. One of the reasons I love King Giz at the moment is you listen to it and it's a whole experience from start to finish, and you want to listen to it. You can't just put it on shuffle. You actually want to listen to it in order.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna reinforce that point. Who came in the late 2000s, early 2010s to push that style of songwriting and music release? Indie bands. So you have all these indie bands that they spent a lot of time coming up with album concepts and making sure that from start to finish the album was strong.
Yeah.
And here's the point I'm going to make as to how that's come back. Folklore and Evermore.
Yep.
Yeah,
We just talked about that. You just picked up those albums. Now you've got Aaron Dessner, an indie guy in The National, who brought an indie band to pop culture, to one of the greatest bands of their era, linking with a pop star and saying, let's just not release hits. Let's really think about what kind of story you want to tell in the album and make sure that it's cohesive. Make sure that from start to finish, you're telling a story here, and you're not just writing 3 hits written by some producer or written by some virtuoso songwriter in Sweden, and then we'll just put a bunch of fluff behind it just to sell this album. But let's just actually put out a substantial piece of art here and something that tells a story. So when someone says what's folklore, well, there's the whole body of work here is a piece. It's not just the hits involved in there. So I think it's coming back, and sure, vinyl reinforced that because you couldn't put a playlist together, right? But vinyl has had a revival for other reasons. We can get into that some other time, but I don't think there's a connection there in terms of vinyl being the one that's brought it back. But I think indie music has really brought that art form back. Instead of it just being hits that producers wanted, these bands were producing themselves, and they were producing in their basements, in their rooms, and they really wanted to make sure that they were putting out an album, not just
Arcade Fire is a band that comes to mind.
Same, like there were some of those early indie rock, they're godfathers of indie rock, right? It's Canadian indie rock scene.
Absolutely. You know what? I couldn't agree more. Like, there's nothing that's more disheartening than going out and buying a record and the only song you like on it is the lead single off the album. I really do hope the album experience comes back, because I prefer just to put on a record, or even if it's MP3 format or whatever it is, I prefer just to hit play and let it do its thing. And I like every song off the album, where I take it in as an album experience. It's not like I want to skip to the hits. I don't like this song. This is fluff, yada, yada, yada. I want to have an album experience.
Agreed.
Yeah, and what actually, it's funny that I'm going to touch into another album that we talked about that we picked up in the last little while. An artist that I'm really into right now is Andy Schaaf. And his last 2 albums that he released, The Party, which I think was maybe 2018, 2019, and then The Neon Skyline, he designed those to be concept albums. So The Party is about, each song is about a different character at a party.
Wow, that's cool.
And their experience at the party, right? So there's a song about a magician. There's a song about someone telling another person that they're in love with them. There's a song about someone not wanting to be at the party and getting shamed for leaving. Like, there's someone who, one of the song Early to the Party is about a guy, the first person that shows up to the party, right? And so
that's
the
really
whole
cool.
album is a concept. And then The Neon Skyline is a song about a guy who's broken up with this girl, and he goes and meets his buddy at a bar called the Neon Skyline, and it talks about, the first song is about him meeting his buddy there, and then there's a whole slew of characters that show up. His ex-girlfriend shows up. They go to a different bar. It's like, so from like, you know, I maybe a lot of people may not like the music, but I'm absolutely in love with this guy. I think everything he touches is gold right now. But the thing I love the most about those albums is that you kind of really have to listen to it from start to finish, because he's telling a whole story, one about a party, one about a guy at a bar. And so you can't just listen at the songs by themselves. They all work together.
That's I know I've mentioned them a little bit, but that is my experience of King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, who I've been listening to a lot since I saw them live. That really, you know, I was familiar with them, but then when I saw them live recently, I just started consuming all of their music. And if you do a little bit of reading, there is theories out there from fans that their entire discography is part of this universe, the Gizverse. And so essentially it's like one story from it's many stories across this one universe, and it all fits, and you're taking this journey as you go. It's not chronological with their albums, but you're taking this journey through the Gizverse. So you can take this whole
cool.
other level of exploring those concepts. But even their two most recent releases, KG and LW, the first track on KG is KGLW, and the last track on LW is KGLW. And they're the bookends of the two albums, and they marry up. Like if you played them next to each other, they're the same song.
Oh wow,
I love that.
So you start the album,
cool.
and when I saw them live, they started with KGLW from the first album, and they finished with KGLW from the second album. So those two tracks bookended the whole live experience. Like they're a band that thinks about how they want you to listen to their music, and I love that.
That's such a cool concept, right? That they put the idea of a studio album, but then it transfers to the live show,
to the live experience.
That's an art, and a lot of musicians
100%.
I think lose that, because you have studio artists and you have live people who do live shows, but in order to do that meshing. But I'm sorry I couldn't focus on anything you were saying, because I'm just real jealous that you get to go to live shows.
Sorry.
Oh, absolutely. I'm missing that right now.
Yeah, just real jealous
Big
of that.
time.
Real jealous.
Fair enough. Apologies. Okay, now it's time for one of our favourite parts of the episode, the hot take. Chris, you're sitting there with your contraption, the hot take wheel of destiny, or Glen, as we prefer to call him. Tell us what's on the wheel today.
All right, so we have colored vinyl in picture disc. Is it cool or is it a gimmick? A popular band you can't get into. Bon Scott or Brian Johnson. U2, yes or no? Or the best song of all time. So let's see. This was working. I got it working this week. You just need to. So let's see if we
spin that wheel.
Oh. Okay. We
Episode
got
2.
U2, yes or no?
Oh,
good one.
Ooh, I like this one.
Wow.
All right.
Okay.
So how are we starting it off?
I'll start. Here we go. U2. Oh, am I frozen? I feel like I'm frozen.
No, we got you.
Okay.
We got you.
We can hear you.
We got
All
you.
right. I'll start us off. U2, Joshua Tree, amazing. Everything else, garbage.
Everything?
Everything else.
Yeah,
Joshua
I was gonna
Tree
say, I don't know
album,
if I agree with that.
fire.
That's a hot take.
Oh my God, I love it. I remember hearing that for like the first time and being like, oh my God, this band's amazing. Went to the next album, was like, I wish nothing else came out by them. I wanted them to be a one record band, fall into
the
like
stuff before.
I know, but that album, amazing. Everything else, I can't even name it. I don't care. It was like poison to my ears. But that album is so good.
Do you know what I love about this? You didn't sit on the fence at all.
No fence sitting for
That
you
was
too.
That was very, very strong.
So I gotta ask. So I agree. Joshua Tree, masterpiece. You can't even appreciate the edge guitar playing. Like, is it just like nothing for you after that album, or do you like any of the musicianship, the writing, and any lyrics, or you're just done?
I'm done. I don't like the Edge. I don't like Bono. Why
don't you like the Edge?
I find his guitar playing like contrary. I don't know. He doesn't seem like natural or like poised. He seems too like rigid and calculated. There's that documentary where they're all sitting on stage.
It might get loud.
Yeah.
It might get loud.
Yeah.
One of my
and I remember
favorites.
watching
Might
it
get
and
loud.
feeling like, I'm being like, I knew it. I knew he's like not a fraud, but like even like Jack White was up there and just killing it. And the Edge couldn't even like keep up. He couldn't even get his mind around what was happening. Couldn't even turn his amp on, in my opinion. I was like, oh, that's embarrassing.
Chris, he ruined that documentary.
Yeah, right. It made me feel uncomfortable. Like I remember my stomach falling out, like being like, I don't want to watch. I haven't watched it since. I remember watching it the first time and then being like, I feel like dirty after. I don't know why.
I actually think having him in the documentary was the masterstroke of that documentary, because he is the only thing that creates tension in that film, because the other two are the same. Like, I'm not giving my hot take about the Edge or U2 yet, but he's so different to to Page and White.
Here's my hot take on that documentary. You couldn't have picked 3 worse characters for that documentary.
That's what made it so fun.
I hate it. I hate that documentary. I think it's terrible. I think it's garbage.
I like Jack White. I like Jack White, but
Jack White is so entertaining.
That's another topic.
What a hot take.
Yeah, that's another hot take. Yeah. Well, we already know what my hot take is on that. Hot take.
Matt, U2, yes or no?
So I'm gonna go with yes, but again, there's albums of theirs I don't really care for, and then there's albums that I do like. Like Joshua Tree, All Day, Every Day. Recently picked it up on vinyl, as I showed you guys in the group. How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb. That's another one that sticks out in my mind. Those are go-tos for me. One of their compilations, U218. There's not a song on there I don't like. I don't know. For me, I do like parts of their discography, and then others I could take and leave. But I do appreciate Edge as a guitar player, because at that time, I feel like he was very innovative. I like that he has a whole guitar rig. As I think he calls it the brain or whatever. I can't remember the exact name of it. I do think it's pretty cool, and he's able to play on top of everything, which I do think is pretty innovative.
So douchey. He's so douchey.
I know a lot of people have an opinion on them, and like in regard to like their personalities, how they carry themselves, how they're perceived in like I know they do a lot of work with charities and not wildlife, but like humanitarian work and stuff like that. And I know a lot of people do kind of view them as a little prestigious. It is what it is. You know what I mean? I'm not going to comment on it.
Let's talk about the music. Just music.
Yeah, 100%. That's what we're here for, is to talk about the music. So no, I say yes to you too.
So I think with U2, it's not about they've made it not about the music, right? They're like Kiss, where they've like taken themselves. Yes, they're about the music, which is why like Joshua Tree, it was about the music. And then after that, it turned into like Bono wearing like $500 sunglasses or $5,000 sunglasses, or like him like the Edge being like the best guitar player and having like this rig that he carries around and everything has to be perfect. They went for the pop star attitude towards rock starism, and that was something that I kind of
I appreciate that, but let's forget this is about the music.
I know, but that's why I don't
let
U2.
your feelings about that dictate how you like or dislike their music.
But it does, though. But there, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. I always find these hard, like a yes or no. I'm gonna say yes, but yes, but not recently is the way I would characterize my experience of
Fair.
U2. And do you know what's funny? My introduction to U2 was actually 90s U2. So Zooropa and Achtung Baby. And I actually really like Achtung Baby. I don't know if
me
it's just
too.
because that was my first, like, and I think it was on cassette. I think my dad had them both on cassette. And Achtung Baby, I was obsessed with that album. I listened to it a lot in the 90s. But then Joshua Tree, of course, like a masterpiece. But also, I was surprised, Chris, when you said only Joshua Tree, because for me, War and The Unforgettable Fire are also really strong albums. Not Joshua Tree strong, but Sunday Bloody Sunday is probably my favorite, all-time favorite U2 track, and that's from War, obviously. So I feel like maybe post-90s for me, it's less of a yes and getting closer to a no. But my initial, I loved U2 in the 90s. I listened to them a lot, and they were a big band by then. But these days, if you ask me who my favorite Irish band is, and I know U2 are kind of international, they sort of transcended just being an Irish band. But if I had to choose one Irish band to listen to, it's the Pogues.
Fair enough.
Yeah. All right. Interesting.
Okay,
I like
so
the
here's is it my turn for
Sure,
this
go.
hot take?
Yeah, there's no turns on hot take.
Rosier.
Here we go.
I'm a hard no.
Ooh.
Absolute hard no. Joshua
Good stuff.
Tree, garbage tier.
Oh,
Every other album, even worse garbage tier.
Whoa, what?
love it.
U2 has not done anything for the rock and roll scene except bring flash. The Edge is not a great guitarist. He's done nothing new that I haven't heard from people before him. And he has this insane, overly complicated setup that guys with an amp and a tube screamer can basically replicate. Like, he does not doing anything that dramatic to tell me that he's a great guitar player. And so to me, the reason why I think he ruined that documentary was I saw that rig and I was like, why the hell do you have 50 guitar pedals?
You need one.
It's just ridiculous. It's absolutely
It's too
ridiculous. It's not like, sure, you're coming up with like all these different sounds. That's awesome. Great. Like, good for you. But like, what have you actually done for guitar other than put pedals together and come up with these ridiculous sounds? Like, great.
He's not like Morello. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, like, okay, like, sure, Tom Morello, but again, Tom Morello, it's a completely different genre of music that they basically
Night and day.
created. Like, Rage Against the Machine is its own sound. U2, it's like, you can pick out a U2 song because of how garbage tier it actually is compared to the rest of music out there.
I've never heard
But-
this expression.
You know,
Big
like,
fan.
I'm just gonna quote South Park here and say, is Bono the biggest piece of crap in the world? You know, like, is he actually made
wow.
of
Whoa,
doo-doo?
keep
Like,
it, Dan. You told me, keep it to the music.
This is the hottest take.
Keep it to the
Wow, I
music.
was not expecting this.
Yeah.
My hot take, I think U2 is trash. I've never listened to a song from them that I thought was, oh, this is great. You know, this is something that is new. I don't understand how they're so big. I really don't get it. They're not for me. If they're for you, that's great. I always respect people's taste in music. I have a taste in music that people think is crazy sometimes. So I'm not one to judge on that. But for me, U2,
People
garbage.
This
Follow
is
them
why
around.
it's a topic, right? Because it's divisive. This is why it's a hot take.
Yeah. But people follow them around. I know people that went like, who I thought had good taste in music, that would like travel around Europe and do their summer vacation based around like the European U2 or U2 tour. Like,
Oh God, they must be
Yeah, I'm not
just
doing
the
that.
worst people to hang around.
oh,
Taste
well,
is
he's a
subjective, though,
he's a
Chris.
horrible
When you
person.
say
No, he's
when
a
you
horrible
say
person.
people
He's
who
my
you thought
ex-boss.
had a good taste in music, taste is subjective.
Yeah, but he's just
For
a
sure.
terrible person, which I associate all YouTube fans with. Way to go, Carvalho.
Is Bono the biggest piece of crap in the world? That's a
Stan.
legitimate question.
Yeah, but like, even the lyrics, come on. Hello.
Shout out to Bono from U2.
Yeah. Hello, hola. I remember hearing that the first time and being like, seriously? Like, come on. Sum 41 writes better lyrics than that. Take it away, Matt.
All right, so I can respect what you guys are saying. I love guitar pedals, and if you look at a lot of modern rigs, a lot of guitar players travel around live shows. They've got like 50 plus pedals with them. They've got 4 different amp heads. You know, I can understand it's a little excessive, but I am a fan of that. So that's my take on that.
Love it.
But man, I was not expecting this. This is pretty funny.
Yeah, I love it.
Listen, I've a lot of respect. I love experimenters. I love it, but the reason why I just don't respect where Bono's going with it is that he just makes a point to be like, oh, someone came out with a new guitar pedal, better grab that, better tweak with every single setting on it and make a sound out of it just because that's my thing.
Okay, fair enough.
You know, that's my thing. My thing is to just make sounds. So it's like, okay, great. Like I respect that. I respect that that's your process on how to make music.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the sound that you're making. I don't find it to actually be that unique. You know, you could have probably gotten that sound with 2 other pedals instead of this one pedal that was made. Like, that's the problem that I have with it. It's like, you've picked up this way to make music, and now that's your thing, and that's what you're known for, and you've leaned into it way too much that it's getting a little bit overworked. It's getting a little bit, I don't know. It's getting diluted.
Okay, that's fair. I can respect that. And then kind of speaking to Tom Morello, we're talking about like 2 different worlds here. You know, Edge is like we were saying, you know, like the brainchild there with his whole rig, as opposed to Tom Morello, who's really a minimalist. He's like, I've got 5 or 4 pedals. I'm going to do whatever I can and maximize what I can with these 4 pedals or 5 pedals, however many he has. You know what I mean? And I do think he's also like beyond innovative at this point. That guy's done a million different things, a million different projects, and he finds a way to make everything sound unique and different. And, you know, one thing, you kind of touched on it there, Dan, you know, you can kind of pick out a U2 song or that signature sound in any of their songs. Like, you hear something on the radio, even if you don't know what the song is, you know it's a U2 song just by the guitar tone. Mm-hmm. That is the one thing you could say, okay, you know what, that's unique to the band, for sure. I can also kind of respect a lot of what you just said there. You know, probably you could take a more a more minimalist approach or a smaller approach and come up with the same sound. I can respect that.
Cool. And this is slightly off topic, but I saw this interview with Morello where he was talking about how he came about that sound. And there was this, I guess, in the 90s, this idea that DJs would replace bands, like DJs were the new thing, and you know, bands were going to be guitars were going to be obsolete because everyone loved DJs, and so he just went, well, I'm going to make DJs obsolete by recreating that sound on my guitar.
So cool. And I love everything he does.
And here's the beauty of it, right? Like, you got a guy at the Edge who has 50 guitar pedals, a ridiculous amount of stacks, all the gear at his disposal. He can't come up with, and to me, I don't think the U2 has their own distinct sound. The only distinct sound is just the most irritable tone of Bono's voice. I don't think the Edge has a distinct guitar tone.
I thought I don't
think you can be like, that is the Edge. That is the Edge. It's his sound. Tom Morello probably has 3 or 4 pedals. Probably got a wah pedal, a fuzz, a tube screamer. That's probably all he's rocking. Maybe a couple, you know,
and an EQ to boost his volume,
reverb, an EQ boost, a chorus pedal, whatever. With just that small amount of rig, he came up with an actually distinct sound. He didn't need 50, 60 pedals, 3 different types of heads, 3 different whatever. Like, he didn't need that. So that's the thing. It's like, the Edge just leaned way too into it, still couldn't come up with his own unique sound. The only unique sound that they have is just the garbage tier screech of Bono's.
You're going to have to be a bit clearer as to how you feel about U2.
Yeah, just
Okay.
a little bit.
I'm still confused.
All right,
You told me earlier in your episode not to swear, so I was like,
Oh, we've been swearing up a storm. Yeah.
you know, I said garbage tier, but I want to say dog shit tier.
Now, I love how this is supposed to be about U2, and this sums up the band as well. We just pushed them aside, like most people do, and talked about someone else, right? Like that's the perfect analogy about how I feel. And I thought I came in hot. Holy shit, Lozier came in on fire. But but no, that's the thing. It's like they're there, like, but they're just there.
Kudos to them, man.
Yeah,
kudos to them. They made an amazing career.
Yeah.
They have a lot of music that people love. They have a huge following. They have a lot of unique tracks. I have a lot of respect for what they've done. It's not for me. I don't like their sound.
Perfect.
I don't like their tone.
Amazing. Tom and Matt, finish us off, because I think we're going in circles that Lozier just hates this band so much.
So that's the reason I actually mentioned the Pogues, because they're another Irish band that have not got, they've got recognition, but not the level of recognition of U2, obviously. But they're a band that actually did push the boundaries. They took folk music and they made it punk.
Dude.
So if you're listening to this and you don't know the Pogues, do me a favor, go and listen to Rum, Sodomy, and The Lash, and then come back to me.
Okay, the Pogues, Flogging Molly, the Real Mackenzie, Stiff Little Fingers. We could go, like...
Dropkick Murphys.
Dropkick. Like, I'm just listing some that I'm, like... Stiff Little Fingers, I just discovered, like, the last 2 years. Holy shit, that band's amazing. That's why I hate U2. It's, like, the Irish band. But, like, I can't remember...
I didn't even know they were Irish until people told me.
Yeah, like, Stiff Little Fingers has a song called, like, Every Dollar a Bullet. I think it's called that. Anyway, that's one of the lines in the song. Holy crap, it's a powerful song about, like, the violence going on in Ireland. Like, they're actually talking about real things, not just screaming hello into a desert.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Matt.
Garbage.
End us off there, Matt.
Okay, first of all, I thought U2 was that big scran that broke out of Scranton, Pennsylvania.
That's funny.
Anyways, just a reference for Office fans. Secondly,
shout out to The Office.
Yeah, one of the greatest shows of all time. Big fan. I'll reference it all day, every day. But I do like U2. I would love I'll be honest. They're one of the bands that's I want to see before they call it quits. Like, just because of the nostalgia and everything. I'm not planning my vacation or anything around them, though, by any means whatsoever. Like, if they come to Toronto, it works out great. If not, it is what it is. You know what I mean? Maybe I catch them another time.
What are you paying for tickets? What's your max out?
No more than $100.
No more than $100. Okay, that's fair.
Are you gonna
You
be able
can
to get
pay
a
me
ticket?
$100 to go.
Yeah, I wouldn't go. I'd stand outside and still be disappointed.
Yeah, boo outside the whole time.
Let's let Matt finish so we can wrap this episode up.
No, that was pretty much where I was going to go. I was just going to say, if I can see them, great. If not, it is what it is. I'll try to catch them another time. But no, I do enjoy their music, and that's my take.
Listen, don't think I love the fact that you love U2. You probably come see some bands that I listen to. You'd be like, what the fuck was that, Dan? Like that.
No, I'm judging Matt hard.
That's the thing is, I'll listen to just about anything, and if I vibe with it, great. If not, I do respect where they're coming from as artists. You know what I mean? Like, everyone's got their own unique taste and style of music, and being an artist, you have to respect that. Like, it's like, you're an artist, you're going to get a positive and negative feedback, and you got to live with that, right?
Absolutely, especially when you're at that
level. Exactly. It's not an easy gig.
If you're gonna bring the fire, you better get ready to get fired down on you.
It's not an easy gig. Like, you're dealing with criticism left and right, and at the end of the day, you just hope that you can connect with people.
Yep.
Okay, well, that was the hottest of hot takes.
That was.
This is why we picked divisive subjects for Glen, the hot take wheel. Anyone, final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Oh, quick one, because I think this will be fun and keep it short and sweet. But just before we go, just to show different musical taste and how things used to be, first CD you ever bought. I'll start us off. Prozac, Hot Show. I think it was called Hot Show.
Love that.
Prozac. That was the first CD I ever bought.
Prozac's fun.
Lozier, what about you?
I think mine was Green Day, Nimrod.
Nice, good
that's
one.
a good one. That's way better than mine. Yeah.
Tom, what do you got?
I don't think I bought it, but Nirvana Nevermind was the first CD I owned.
Nice.
That's
Wow,
amazing.
That's a home run right there.
Yeah.
Actually, all three of those were really, really good. You guys are probably going to get a good chuckle out of this one, although I still like this band to this day. Hanson, Middle of Nowhere.
Oh, amazing.
First CD I ever bought, and first cassette I ever bought.
Yo, that's so good.
Amazing.
That's unreal.
I saw them. It was funny. They did the Western Fair back in 2014 or 2015. They were part of the music that was playing in the evening. They came and did a free show one of the nights, along with the Trues was also there. Lights was there. They did a show as well. And they had new music that they were playing. I was like, oh shit, this is actually really good.
Oh.
I ended up buying one of their CDs there. It was really good.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I like them. I'm sorry.
That's amazing.
Shout out to Hanson.
Yeah, shout out.
Absolutely.
Oh, man.
Hanson, if you're listening to this, I know you guys have a brewery that you guys have been working on.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So feel free to send us some samples.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we'll name the hot take wheel after them.
Yes.
They'll be
We will
sponsored.
name the hot take the Bop hot take. Take it or leave it wheel.
The wheel is not for sale.
Everything is for sale. Everything is for sale.
Oh, dear. Okay, on that note, might wrap things up. Thanks for joining us. This has been episode 2 of the Groovy Guys, Create Expectations. Be sure to check us out on Instagram at Create Expectations Pod, and make sure you like it and subscribe, and we'll catch you next episode. You can also keep track of us on the web at createexpectationspod.com, or flick us an email at createexpectationspod@gmail.com. Until next time, keep digging and spinning.